right, welcome to episode 12 of the Bulls REKAP Podcast. I'm Joe Colley of the Chicago Sun-Times. You can obviously read me in the Chicago Sun-Times. You can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at @JCowleyHoops. So the other day I go downstairs in the basement, and my son's down there watching Cooper Flagg and Duke. And he's like, this guy's good. This kid's good. This kid's good. Because every 16, 17-year-old is up on Cooper Flagg right now. And I tried telling him, you don't even understand college basketball the way it used to be. You don't understand the investment of personality and culture that I grew up with at your age. And to me, when you talk about that era of college basketball and the college basketball stories written about that era, you could talk about Georgetown. You could talk about so many guys. There's got to be a chapter on my next guest, Bulls coach and former Providence legend, Billy Donovan.
Thanks, Joe.
Billy. So, you know what? Let's go back there first. Okay. So you're there in the epicenter of Big East basketball. Ewing is at Georgetown. The Hoya paranoia is kind of this thing that is sweeping across the country. And there's no social media. There's no highlights. The pictures you see are either in the newspaper or your weekly Sports Illustrated. And then you see the scores and you hear about this guy and this guy. And they beat Phi Slamma Jamma. I mean, and so you're there. And I remember you telling us your first couple of years at Providence, you felt unliked by the people there. You felt like you were booed and you were not liked. How much of that you think was they were looking around at the rest of the Big East and seeing what Georgetown was doing, seeing what Chris Mullin had done at St. John's, seeing Syracuse starting to come on. And they're like, why is this small kid from New York? What's he going to do? How's he going to change us? How's he going to match up with those guys? Do you think that played into it?
Oh, I definitely think so. And I also think, Joe, like back at that time, like I remember growing up, I think the Big East started around 1980. And I remember, being in high school, buddy of mine's father had St. John's tickets. So I can remember going and seeing Roosevelt Bowie and Louis Orr playing from Syracuse. Sleepy Floyd was at Georgetown with those teams, right? And then, here I get offered a scholarship to go to Providence, and I see the Providence Civic Center, 15,000. My high school gym seated 800 people. I'm like, I'm going and playing in the Big East. That's kind of where it was at, was the Big East back then. So I came out like in 83, and probably clearly like I was will be considered now like a late signee, so to speak. I didn't make a decision probably until April. But when I was coming out of high school, it was Mark Jackson, who was at Bishop Loughlin in Brooklyn. And then you had Pearl Washington, was at Boys and Girls. He was the number one high school player in the country. And then you had Kenny Smith, who was at Malloy. So I wasn't being recruited by anybody at all. I was all Division II, low Division I. And once Pearl Washington, Kenny Smith, and Mark Jackson started to make decisions, Mark Jackson and Pearl Washington stayed in the Big East. Kenny Smith went to Carolina. Everybody started scrambling. And I was probably, whatever it was on their depth chart, third, fourth, or fifth. And they were filling out rosters. And they probably looked at me going in there. And it was, I think, before we got back to the NCAA tournament, it was 10 straight years of never even making the tournament. And, I think when you look at Providence basketball's history and the players that have played there, from John Thompson to Ernie D to Kevin Stakem to Jimmy Walker, Marvin Barnes, I mean, there's a lot of tradition there. And certainly I probably didn't fit that tradition at all coming in as a freshman.
Did you ever think of, when you're hearing it, and obviously there's no social media, you're not getting beat up on social media or the internet, but you're hearing it. Did you ever think, oh, shoot, maybe I reached too far. Maybe I should go. But transferring really wasn't a thing then, was it?
Yeah, it was. The thing that was interesting, Joe, during that time for me, and I learned a lot. I made a decision to go there. One, my dad really, really trusted and respected Joe Mulaney. He had obviously coached the Lakers, and he was a legendary coach. My freshman year, I played with Otis Thorpe. He was a senior my freshman year. And back then, it was a 45-second shot clock. So coming out of high school, I played in a system and a style where there was no plays. Our high school coach wanted a shot in 4 seconds. half my high school career, I never even crossed half court. I advanced the thing up the floor and we shot it. Right. I'm now stuck in a situation where we're trying to get the ball to Otis. We're playing in the half court, 45-second shot clock. And quite honestly, I'm getting overwhelmed athletically with, to your point, those Georgetown teams, St. John's teams, Villanova teams. And it was really, but there was a part of me for some reason that I felt like I could definitely play. Right. And as I looked at the possibility of leaving, the thing that came to my mind was I got to go to a style of play that's going to allow me to play a little bit faster in space, more so than getting locked up in the half court. And that's kind of how we played my first 2 years.
So then Rick comes. What do you think he saw in you? He comes for your junior year, and there's no 3-point. That's the following year. What do you think he saw in you that all of a sudden you fit the system, you worked?
Well, it was interesting. My first 2 years, I spent a lot of time with Ernie D because he was around, and I just tried to talk to him, about, how I could be better. And because he was a smaller guard and, obviously played in the NBA and he was we used to play one-on-one, but like I probably got influenced, quite honestly, by my dad, and probably got influenced a little bit by people around me. They were like, you got to go. Like the starting backcourt's coming back. You're, going into your junior year. You're playing minimally 4 or 5 minutes. You only have 4 years to play. Go somewhere and just go play. Go play somewhere. So it kind of was out there that I was leaving. Now, with that being said, Joe, there was not one Division I team that was like knocking down my door to, like come get me. It was all Division II. And it was part of me that, I don't know if it was ego or belief or what it was. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm not leaving this. Like, I'm leaning into this and I can do this. So when Coach Pitino came, like, he caught me off guard because the first meeting I had with him, he's like, I hear you're thinking about transferring. And I was just kind of like, that's probably not a good foot to get off with the new head coach. Right. Here he is. He's not committed. And I said, I've thought about it. And he said, listen, I don't want you to leave. He said, I'll just tell you this. If you do everything I asked you to do, it'll be the best 2 years experience of your life. But I'm not promising you anything. I'm not promising you 1 minute. I'm not promising you any playing time. I'm not promising you anything. You're going to have to earn it. But if you listen to what I'm telling you, here's how we're going to play this, what we're going to do. And I think he probably knew a little bit about me because where Coach Pitino went to high school was like arch rival to where I went to high school, and Ralph Willard and all those guys. It was kind of like the same area in New York.
So he kind of knew the makeup.
I think so. And he knew the way I came out of high school and the way I played. But I didn't think I gave him any hope or any optimism, like, wow, this guy's going to be a good player. But I listened to him. And the one thing, Joe, I think happened when I made the decision not to leave. And as a young player, I think this really hit home to me. Like, I had to really take a deep look in the mirror because I let myself go physically. I put on weight. I was pointing fingers everywhere. Style of play, coach's fault, this, and this. And I finally came to the realization, you know what? If I was any good, the coach would have me out there playing. And clearly I can't do enough to impact this group and this coach. And you know what? Like, I got to change. And I probably that summer ended up dropping, I don't know, maybe 25 pounds. I went from 190 something to 170. And I got in great shape because he told me I needed to be in great shape. And then things, I also think too, physically, I was very immature. Like, I probably didn't start shaving till I was a junior in high school. I mean, junior in college. You know what I mean? Like, I was physically weak. Heck, I didn't even have my driver's license till my mother had enough. She had bothered enough driving me around New York. She's like, "Can you please get your driver's license? I'll catch either the train or the bus or ride my bike somewhere."
Right.
So I grew up, I think, that summer in a lot of ways. Like, I took responsibility. I always loved the game and wanted to play, but I didn't know how to work. I think Coach Pitino really helped me with that. But that was really transformative for me, where I looked back and said, you know what, like, I'm the problem. Like, I'm not taking enough responsibility. And it's not about style of play. It's about what I need to do. And then I would think I always had the work ethic. I just didn't know how to apply it.
I mean, yes. I mean, that's a good point because I think now with the way college is set up, these one and dones leave. They never look at the mirror and say they're the problem. So that realization, if it ever comes, probably comes in your first, second, third year in the NBA. We've already pointed fingers and you've already done this and this, why this isn't working out, where I'm on the wrong team. And so, I mean, it goes back to the whole idea of why 4 years in college, or at least 3 years in college, how important that is and what's kind of been lost. So I remember, I mean, we're only like 3 or 4 years apart, but so I'm still in high school and I hated your Providence team. When you guys upset Georgetown, because they in the tournament they had beat your guys' ass a couple weeks earlier. It wasn't even close.
That's right.
And I know Perry McDonald was there for 20 years, and Charles Smith was there for 10 years. But Reggie Williams was my guy. Loved him. Loved everything about him. Ewing was gone. Michael Graham was gone. But still, it was still Hoya paranoia. What do you think to me, that win, I mean, Providence was hot at the beginning of the tournament. But then you guys beat Georgetown. To me, that got you in the Final Four. You lost to, it was Syracuse then, right? After that?
Yes.
But still, it seemed that game was a signature game for Providence basketball. I mean, is that fair to say that everything changed in that one game?
I think so. The one thing that was interesting, Joe, is like my sophomore year, that's when Ewing and Chris Mullin was still there, Ed Pinckney. 3 of the 4 Final Four teams were from the Big East.
Big East, yep.
Right? And then my senior year, you got Providence and Georgetown are in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four, and Syracuse are in the Final Four, right? So You're dealing with a time where the league was really good. I think probably the signature win is we beat Georgetown at Providence on a buzzer beater. And
earlier
that was like the earlier in the year, right? That was big. And then we got absolutely destroyed in the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland. I mean, blown out. And then we played them in the Big East tournament in the semifinals. We beat St. John's to get to the semis.
And they got you there then, too.
Blasted us.
Yeah,
that was they blasted us. And that was kind of like we played them 3 times. So we played Syracuse and Georgetown. You never hear this anymore. We played Syracuse and Georgetown 4 times that year.
Yeah.
And as you know, remember, Joe, like back then, like there was fights every single game. And all there was technical. All there was technical fouls, and nobody got thrown. Yeah. No one got thrown out of games. I mean, our Final Four game against Syracuse, like within the first 10 minutes of the game, there was a complete fisticuffs between Derek Coleman and our starting power forward, Dave Kipper. And, guys were all up off the bench. So that game going into it was, I thought, an unbelievable coaching job by Coach Pitino, because I never forget going into the game. And this is the one thing, Joe, and you and I have talked about this a little bit. You can identify with this. You're a young kid, you're playing, you go to the playground, you go to the schoolyard. Next thing you know, there's 25 or 30 guys out there, and you're like, you know what? Yeah. If we don't win, I'm sitting out here and I don't get a chance to play today.
Hours.
Right? Yep. So your winning becomes so important, to the game at an early age. And, I think I may have been, scoring well in the tournament or whatever. And Coach Pitino comes to Delray Brooks and myself and says, listen, if you guys want to win, neither one of you 2 guys can take a shot the entire game. And because the way they're playing defense, it's almost like a triangle and 2 on you guys. And this is what's open. This is how we got to play. And you're going to have to trust these other guys. And we won the game because we had a bunch of other guys step up, but I don't think I took more than 4 shots in the game.
I think you had, I looked a couple weeks ago, you had 1 3, but I think you went to the free throw line like 16 times.
I think 20 times. I think I went to the free throw line 20 times or something like that. But
yeah, I didn't take any points. I know that.
Yeah, I didn't take any shots either to Delray. And really it was the rest of the team that helped us win that game. And we were all kind of bought into trying to win, and you're at a point to try to get to a Final Four. You're going to do whatever you think's got to do. And, I think Coach Pitino, after having 2 games in the Capitol Center in DC, and then in the Big East tournament in the Garden of getting blown out, we had to change something. And, we did. And it really, really helped us win the game.
Yeah. You broke my heart that day. All right. So to me then, I think everyone knows your story. You graduated, there was a short stint with the Knicks, and then I think you're on Wall Street for a little bit. you get back into coaching. When you're at Kentucky, again, we're talking about you're on the floor when legendary things happen. You're an assistant at Kentucky. I think I remember you mentioned the Leitner shot. You were assistant then. And then were you an assistant when they lost to the Fab Five as well? Or the Fab Five as well?
Yes.
So, I mean, two iconic. And then you also had, you face UNLV then when they had Larry Johnson?
No.
Okay, you guys did not. Okay. I mean, so you're talking in that time frame of the running Rebs, Tark's running Rebs, what was happening at Duke, and then what Michigan did with the Fab Five, which to me not only changed college basketball, but the fabric of society and basketball culture all the way through high school with the shorts and just whatever fashion, everything. Three iconic teams. I mean, when you look back on that and that time in Kentucky, and you're watching those legendary teams, I mean, that's the greatest, right? I mean, that has to be the greatest time for college basketball in that mix of eras.
No, it was unbelievable. And it's kind of what you mentioned, Joe, too. Like, guys weren't really coming out. Like Shaquille O'Neal stayed in college for like 3 years. I mean, it was crazy. The other game I was a part of, too, was I was an assistant at Kentucky, and we were down by 31 points with 15 minutes to go at LSU and came back and won in regulation. I was there for that, So, I mean, you talk about even the players that were in the SEC at that point in time. You had Shaquille O'Neal, Stanley Roberts.
Yeah.
Yep, and Chris Jackson, Latrell Sprewell. I mean, it was Allen Houston. I mean, the list goes on. And those games were incredible. Duke had won the national championship, and then we had that loss to them in the Spectrum in Philly, which was just heartbreaking. And then that following year, we ended up playing Michigan. I think it was an overtime or double overtime game. We lost. We had Mashburn, and he fouled out, I think, and he was like our center at like 6'8", and that was the game, I think, where North Carolina maybe beat Michigan in the championship game where Weber tried to call timeout, I think. It was so
timeout, yeah.
Just being around that point and seeing some of that stuff was amazing.
And to this day, you agree that not putting anyone on the ball for Leitner was the right call. I remember you explained why.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we ended up going around and around on it. We were small. We were 6'6", and Grant Hill was 6'9". How much impact could he really make on the ball within? And we thought like putting two guys. And the thing that was crazy is we had the two guys in the right spot. I think what ended up happening, if you look at the play, right when Leitner catches it, both of our guys are like, "I'm not fouling," and we kind of pulled back, and it kind of at 6'11" gave him a shot, but. I don't know, maybe he would have been isolated one-on-one. I think sometimes when stuff doesn't work out, you can always sit there and say, well, if we did put him on the ball, the result couldn't have been any worse, right?
Right.
But I did feel like it was the right thing to do.
So you go to, let's fast forward now. You go to Marshall, and you get a kid out of West Virginia, Jason Williams. You leave, you take the Florida job, he comes with you. To me, that really had to set the table for you as far as I'm coming to Florida. It was almost like Deion saying, and I'm bringing my luggage. I'm bringing my Gucci luggage. You bring a kid that, for at that time was basically a white kid playing a playground style of basketball that you didn't see a lot of white kids playing at the time.
Yep.
How fun was he to coach? And I can only imagine the stuff that he would do in practice that we probably never all got to see on the court. It must have just been mind-boggling. How many times I've tried the elbow pass and it never works out.
He and I got very, very close. A lot of people don't know this, Joe. When I was an assistant at Kentucky, there was a coach I knew that was coaching like NAIA in West Virginia. And he called me and says, Billy, there is a kid out of Bell, West Virginia that loves Kentucky. 6'1", he's a point guard, Jason Williams. And we had Travis Ford at Kentucky, who was our starting point guard, who was going to graduate. And this was before the July recruiting period. So I called up Jason, spoke to him, and I said, hey, listen, do you want to come down to our camp? And at this point in time, Joe, I'm probably like in my early to mid 20s, maybe. So I'm still.
Did you feel you were about to get a head coach job somewhere else?
No. This was very early on. I mean, I was starting to recruit. I mean, I was probably in my mid 20s. I think I got the Marshall job when I was 28. So maybe it was like 2 or 3 years away from that. So I bring Jason to camp, and every single day we're playing one-on-one, helping him, watching him play, and I really have fallen in love with this guy. Coach Pitino's watching him at camp, but he's playing against campers, so it's really it's a realistic thing against high-level competition. So he goes to the Nike All-American camp, and he never was like an all-star kind of player. Like he didn't play good. And Coach Pitino's like, listen, Billy, we got to get a guy that can come in and start. Jason Kidd was coming out at the same time, and Coach was like, we got to try to get Jason Kidd. I'm like, Coach, I am trying, but this guy's out in California. This is a hard get.
Yeah.
It was one of the most difficult conversations, Joe, I ever had to make. Because he and I spent a lot of time together, Jason. I called him up and I said, Jason, listen, we're not going to offer you a scholarship to Kentucky.
Was he heartbroken?
He handled it great on the phone, but I was crushed because I love the kid and I loved how much he loved the game. And I knew he was going to be a good player, but I also knew we had to bring in someone that was ready right away. Jason was probably 6'1", 155 pounds his senior year in high school. So fast forward I shouldn't say, you're probably right, Joe, maybe a little bit, maybe 27 there. So I'm close to getting the job. I get the Marshall job at the end of the season. Jason signs to go to Providence College with Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes leaves Providence and goes to Clemson. Pete Gillen comes into Providence, and Pete Gillen in the late signing period signs like 2 point guards. I'm now at Marshall, and I get a phone call from Jason's dad who basically saying, hey, listen, we're trying to get out of our scholarship. You went to Providence. Can you talk to them? So I talked to the athletic director, and they were like, hey, listen, we're going to let him go if he doesn't want to come. So back then, if you were going to leave, you had to go to a prep school for a year to let the year it's almost like a sit-out year out of high school. He had to go to prep school. So he went to prep school, Fort Union Military Academy. And never forget this. His dad's called me and it's like, yeah, I'm recruiting him now. I'm trying to get him to come to Marshall. He grew up 30 miles from Huntington, West Virginia. So his dad got him dad's calling me saying, Billy, he's really unhappy. He wants to come home. I'm like, Mr. Williams, he has got to stay up there because he's got to get through school to get qualified. Calls me back again. Says, Coach, he is really upset. He wants to come home. I'm like, Mr. Williams, you got to keep him up there.
Right.
The third time he says to me, he says, Billy, I got to go up there and get him. I said, Mr. Williams, don't do that. Make him stay up there. He said, Billy, he's already threatened to hitchhike home on the interstate if I don't come get him, and he'll do it, right?
Yeah.
So he ends up coming home, and now he's not doing anything. He's coming down to the gym, but he's not made any decision. And then one day he comes to my office at Marshall and is like, hey, I'm going to come. I'm going to come to Marshall. So he had to sit out that year. He practiced with our team in the second semester. I think he was freshman of the year. And then I made the decision to go to Florida, and he came to me. He's like, I want to come. I'm like, Jason, you're an icon in West Virginia. Just stay here. Nope, I want to come. So I took him, but nobody, Joe, at that point knew how good he was. Like nobody
he had to sit out another year then, right?
Another year, but no one had an idea. So what happened was some of these NBA guys started to kind of come through scouts, and they couldn't believe how good the guy was. And I knew that he was going to be a high draft pick. Right when he was at Marshall, like I knew right away, he's fast, he can shoot. I used to tell him all the time, Joe, I said, Jason, listen, I don't care if you throw it behind your back, through your ear, wherever you want to throw it. But I'm telling you, if that thing ends up on the stands, you're just going to come over and sit down next to me. So be as crazy as you want, but you better make sure it happens.
And so, that's a good point because he played with such flair. And if he came at that time, especially if you came across a coach, he couldn't play for a Bobby Knight. He couldn't, there's just certain coaches. How did you allow even your Florida teams that won back-to-back with Joakim and them? You allowed a certain amount of you be you until you starts affecting the team. Was that kind of the rule of thumb?
That's right. That's exactly right. You know what I mean? And I would never want to take away somebody's, flair. But like I told Jason, I said, Jason, like if you want to, I'm fine with that, but you can't do it at the expense of the group. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to tell you can't do it, but if you're going to do it, you better execute it. Now, Joey, this guy, I mean, I was fortunate. I mean, I coached some guys that were just flat out basketball gym rat junkies. I mean, I'm talking guys that like loved the game. This guy would go through our practices, would skip study hall, which would drive me nuts.
Right.
And then he would go down to the student recreation center and play pickup ball for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I used to get him up at 6 o'clock in the morning when he would come late to stuff and run him. So after about a week of doing that, he comes into my office as coach. How about this? How about I never go to class and I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and run every day? I'm like, it's probably not a good idea. Jason. We got to keep you eligible.
Yeah, yeah. So you and I have talked about coaching. Obviously, in my off season, I coach football. It's middle school kids. To me, though, coaching is coaching. And, you know, last month, one of the guys I coached with my oldest son called me and he said, hey, one of the guys we had who's would have been my son's oldest age, my oldest son's age, 23, was shot and killed. And I'm thinking, like, at first I was like, wow, you're kind of stunned. And then, like, for a couple of days, I couldn't shake it because and then I'm thinking, you know, why is this? Because you give a little piece to all these kids, I think, kind of. And you know, you're going to lose touch with them. They're going to go do their own things, but you hope that you put some kind of fabric in them, something that they could kind of build that base on. So, I still think about it. It still bothers me. And it's just one of those things. I look back at Florida and obviously, you know, a whole different circumstance, but just reading some of your comments when the Gators finally had to ask Teddy Dupay to leave, it seemed like you were generally heartbroken with that decision. People that don't know, Teddy Dupay, and I told you the story the other day. Wanson, coach from Shaker Heights. I was really close with him. He had some stud players. And then he coached all-star teams with Ruben Patterson, Melvin Levin. I mean, when Cleveland basketball was really going well, Doc Taylor. And so he came back. They took a Shaker team down to Florida. He came back. He goes, we saw something we've not seen. I'm like, what? This little white dude, he had 68 on us through 3 quarters. And Shaker was no joke. I mean, they were – and then I looked, and it was Teddy Dupay. He was only a junior then. You end up getting him to come to Florida, and he had some injuries, but it just seemed like Teddy Dupay could not stay out of his own way, whether it was gambling, drug, whatever he got into. Was that – it seemed like that was hard for you when I just read the transcripts of the press conference that it didn't work out for him. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, no, it was hard. It was hard because there was a lot of relationships that ran deep on that one. So my high school coach, I mentioned the way we played, it was 4 seconds. And I mean, really, really, really instrumental in my life. A guy that I grew up with and played basketball with, who played college basketball with my high school coach's son. He was the head coach at Mariner High School. Where Teddy Bay, he was his head coach. He called me about him right when I got the job, and we connected. Told me about Teddy. He left and took a college job with Travis Ford, I think, at Eastern Kentucky.
Okay.
But he got my high school coach, who was retired living in New York, to move to Cape Coral, Florida, and coach Teddy for his senior year. So Teddy's senior year, he was being coached by my high school coach that coached me.
Right.
Well, there was this deep relationship there. And I had started recruiting Teddy when he was finished his sophomore year. And, you know, you're right. There was at that point in time, and I still keep in touch with Teddy.
Who's doing well.
He's doing great.
He runs a basketball academy. It seems like things are going really well.
He's doing great. But there was 98% of him was just absolutely incredible, charismatic, great team guy, winner, competitor, tough, not afraid of the moment. But there was always this other side that he was always kind of maybe flirting with some trouble. And, you know, it was a really difficult situation. And I don't know Joe ever, because he's still, now I haven't talked to him about this in such a long time, but he denied all of it. I know there was a federal investigation, but it got out, and it got out to other college programs who had called me. And then I kind of had to turn it over to the administration. And then I was kind of left out of it just because they didn't want me involved in it. And it was just a mess. And it just broke my heart because this guy helped change the trajectory of our program. The three guys that came in that year was Haslam, Mike Miller, and Teddy Dupay.
Right.
Haslam was not a McDonald American. Mike Miller and Dupay were. They changed the whole identity of the program. And when you got a guy that does that, who's from the state of Florida, who your high school coach is coaching, and you see him go through that, it crushed me. And I felt bad for him and what it was going to mean and do for his life.
So you guys get on the map with that team, but then obviously the whole world changes for you, the 05, 06, and 06, 07, back-to-back. And you've talked about that team and Joakim and Horford, how special that group was, Brewer, and all the role players around there. Everyone thinks it's just those three, but, I mean, it was just two back-to-back great teams. So you're on that campus at the time. The football program is just as successful. How much stress were you feeling? And Urban Meyer's talked about it. The stress ate him up because even in the documentary, you could see – you're trying to stay at this level and be at the top, and the program just got out of control, the football program. For basketball, it seemed like it eventually wore on Urban. But it seemed like you didn't let it get to you like that. It seemed like you kind of understood the moment of it was a chapter and it's a new chapter and you flip the page each time. How are you not able to beat yourself up or get caught up and I can never do this again? How am I going to do this again and win back-to-back national championships?
Yeah. Well, the thing that was interesting is when and I really believe this, Joe, and I think every coach is always going to be advocate for their teams, but that group started off their sophomore year unranked. We weren't even ranked. And then they won the national championship. So you could sit there and say, okay, well, that group caught lightning in a bottle. They got hot at the right time and they won it. But now the whole entire team comes back. The starters come back at least, add some freshmen. Now they start the season number one in the country and do it again. I don't think there's any team in the history of college basketball that's won back-to-back championships that started one year unranked, the other next year ranked,
number
right?
One. Yeah.
What was really, really hard the second year? It was really hard. It was interesting. I think I mentioned this the other day before we played. I went to go see Pat Riley because they had won back-to-back just to try to talk to him. I spent some time with Coach Belichick. I talked to Coach Pitino. I talked to a lot of different people. And the one word that kept coming up was distractions. And I basically wrote down what I saw the distractions to be. And I threw myself into the distractions. Like I could be a distraction in some way.
Right.
What am I doing to be a distraction, right? But agents, people jockeying for those guys to represent them in the draft, sneaker companies, stuff on campus, people enticing them, giving them all sorts of different stuff. And we kind of talked about it. And I'll tell you what, it was a lot for them. And people don't realize this, Joe, like back in the day, and I'm not so sure how all the agency stuff works. We had 3 to 5 runners that lived in Gainesville that were around these guys every single day, trying to position. It was like me. It'd be like me recruiting in July and following a guy around. They were just following these guys around. And it was a lot for them to handle. And what started to happen was, and there's a great volleyball coach at Florida named Mary Wise, and she had lost in a national championship. And this really stuck with me. And she had her whole team coming back, and they just got knocked out really early the next year and kind of underperformed, underachieved. And I asked her, what did she learn? And she said, Billy, I took the mentality that I was going to leave no stone unturned. And it was just nobody was happy. It was like nothing was ever good enough. And that stuck with me. And I told our guys, like, we're responsible for our own happiness and joy. And it was a lot. Like Joe went from being this lightning rod, unbelievable guy to his junior year. He's a complete villain and he can't understand. And now he's
right.
And now people are telling Horford, hey, if you do this, and this, you're going to be a top 5 pick. Now he's worried about like there was a lot of that, what we were always managing. But the one thing I give those guys credit for, when you brought them back to center, it always came back to the same thing, winning. That's all it came back to. And it was my responsibility to kind of bring them back to center and eliminate a lot of the stuff that they had to deal with, which was unfair, but it was just the reality of it.
I mean, yeah, I could talk basketball with you all day, but I know I got to get you out of here. Before I let you go, I do something called the interrogation room. I'll ask you just 5 or 6 questions. First thing off the top of your mind. So I heard you like classic rock.
I do.
Okay. Rank Led Zeppelin, Stones, Aerosmith, 1, 2, and 3.
I'm going to go Stones, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith.
Okay.
I just saw them this summer too, Joe.
Who? Stones? God bless them. They're still
Took
doing
my
it.
dad.
Do all the guys from New York or New Jersey have to like Bruce Springsteen? Is that a rule?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Michael Graham from Georgetown. Intimidating as he seemed, or was he a teddy bear?
Intimidating.
Okay. All right. Good. If you could take one movie on an island, on a desert island, it's going to be the one movie you could watch the rest of your life. What is it?
Saving Private Ryan.
Outstanding. All right. All right. You only have one scholarship to give. Looking back on it, it could either go to Al Horford or Joakim Noah. Who would get it?
That would I'd have to half it.
Half it. Then they got to work in the cafeteria. That's it.
That's exactly right.
Let's see. Who was the first one of your kids to beat you one-on-one in basketball?
My oldest, Billy.
Did it affect you or no?
No, it didn't affect me. But I used to give my younger one a hard time. You want to play horse every day? I would keep the score in the refrigerator. That would really drive him nuts. Nice. Yeah. My wife would ask me why I'm torturing him.
I in the summer when I'm home, obviously a lot more, I rank my kids like an AP poll. Each month there's a new ranking. Got to keep them on their toes. And then obviously best high school player you ever saw, and then best high school player that got away from recruiting that you thought you had and something happened. Whether you were in Kentucky as assistant, wherever you were.
Best high school player I saw, Kevin Garnett.
Okay.
Best high school player that got away. Gosh, there's a lot of them, Joe. I couldn't even.
I know you've told us many, but who's the one that really you thought you had and it just didn't?
Yeah.
happen?
I'll give you one that's going to be outside the box because people probably don't realize this. His father played at the University of Florida, and I thought he was coming. Trevor Ariza.
Oh, that is a good one.
Yeah, Trevor Ariza. He was out of California, Westminster. It was right by the LAX airport there. Great program, but he was a guy. His father played at Florida, and he always loved Florida. I thought we were going to have a real legit chance, and he was a really good player coming out of high school.
I have a funny Garnett story real quick before I get you out of here. He comes to the Solon Cage Classic with Team Michigan. It's him, tractor trailer, this kid Desmond Ferguson, who I think ended up going to Missouri, shooter, Winfred Walton, Syracuse, Terrence Roberson, who Tarkanian took to Fresno. Kid was out of his mind, but bonkers player.
I had his cousin, Anthony Roberson, played for me at Florida.
Okay, so they come to Solon for this Cage Classic, and at the time they beat this really good Cleveland team, Damon Stringer and who else was on that team? Posey was on that team. Ruben Patterson was on that team. Anyway, I'm interviewing Garnett. There's no media there, and I'm interviewing Garnett for like 20 minutes. And at the end, he goes, I don't know, Joe, what would you do? Would you go to college? Because I think he was going to go to Michigan. Or would you go pro? And I'm like, if I was you, I'd go to Michigan. College was pretty fun. A month later, he goes pro. I was like, good thing you didn't listen to me. I'm a moron. Billy, thanks a lot for doing this. I can talk. I can talk. Everyone's going to be like, well, why is there no Bulls talk? You know why? Because I talk Bulls with you every day, and it gets boring for me. I love just talking basketball, especially college basketball, the era. To me, it's the best. And like I said, you are a chapter in it that can't be overlooked. So,
well, I appreciate it, Joe. It was a pleasure being on with you. Thanks. I love talking too. It was great.
All right, I'll see you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right,
thanks, Joe. Appreciate you.
Okay. All right. Appreciate you. Oh, that was good. He's that's just like you could sit at a bar and just talk college basketball from my era, old man ass era. So I know a lot of younger people are like, well, who cares about that era? But trust me, it was special, and Billy Donovan was a big reason why. All right, let's get to Kali Allen, the rant. Jimmy Butler's in the news. I think people know I've always been Team Jimmy. Had a chance to talk with Jimmy. Let's clear the air on Jimmy. I know people are calling him Jimmy the headache. Jimmy doesn't like buckets. Jimmy causes trouble. So you go to Miami Heat culture. You put in all the practice time. You do what's asked of you. But you let them know that, hey, if I come there, so you know, I tend to fly separately. I like to bring my group with me. And I tend to stay in places that are different from the team. There's a bunch of NBA guys that do that, including nice guy Steph Curry. Obviously not with the frequency of Jimmy Butler, but there's guys that do it. It is done. And it's not a problem until it's a problem. So you agree on that if you're Miami, that Heat culture decides it's okay. But now, when you lie to Jimmy Butler for 2 years that you were going to get him help, because I think anybody that watched the last finals run, that following regular season, you just see a guy that just needs help in the regular season. Get him to the finals, and you know he's a different guy. Playoff Jimmy, that's the nickname. But this idea that Jimmy's a bad guy and all of a sudden not obeying rules and you're suspending him because of rules, you're suspending him for shit that you allowed to happen for years. But now that he's a problem child, now you're going to put him in his room, and now you're going to take away his phone privileges. So utterly ridiculous. Is Jimmy 100% innocent in this? Absolutely not. But anyone that knows Jimmy and knows his past, trust is the fabric of what he is made of. And when you betray that trust and you tell him you're going to do something and you don't, you're going to have a problem. So the next team he goes to, understand that he will lay it all on the line for you until he won't. And the reason he won't is because you betrayed that trust. So that's my rant. If you don't like Jimmy Butler, you're missing out. And let's get to the list. We are less than a week away from the February 6th NBA trade deadline. So we're going to update Bulls players most likely to be traded. We'll go from 5 to 1. This is just my feeling, talking to people in the organization. Number 5, Torrey Craig. He's hurt. That does not help his situation. But to me, his contract is is a nice throw-in piece. It's not like teams are beating down the door for Torrey Craig, but the contract is a nice throw-in piece if he is packaged, whether it's going to be with guys that are higher up on the list or in a bigger package. Number 4, Zach LaVine. This one's going to be hard to do for them. Milwaukee is sniffing. Golden State is sniffing. The Bulls are willing to jump into the Jimmy Butler fray if it turns into a 4 or 5 team trade, which it very well could. The Bulls would be interested in getting involved in that in some capacity, but it's just going to be hard. The contract, it might be a move that's made better towards in the summer. I'm not ruling it out. I think Arturas Karnisovas is going to be very active next week. But Zach, I think, is the tough one. Number 3, Kobe White. Kind of a surprise, but kind of not. He's got this year and next year with his contract. I wouldn't say he and Ayo DeSumo are redundant players because they're not. But Josh Giddey is, in all intents and purposes, here to stay. I don't know the number, the price Josh Giddey's coming back on. But to me, Kobe and Josh just don't work. Giddey can play with Ayo. Kobe can play with Ayo. Kobe and Josh don't work, and I think they're more committed to Josh because they traded for him. I don't think Josh is the better player. I'm just saying I think they're more committed to Kobe White. So I think Kobe's number 3, very movable contract, could be part of a package or could be just a singular piece. Number 2, Lonzo Ball. He's healthy. The minutes are up to 26. Back-to-backs are still out, but the fact that he is just playing winning basketball on both ends, he makes every team he goes to, he makes their second unit way, way better. And the difference between finishing in the finals or winning it all. And then finally, Vooch. I think he's going to go. I think there's growing momentum that he is the 3rd or 4th domino to fall. It's going to be Jimmy Butler's domino number 1. Then the league will reset and see where they're at. De'Aaron Fox, probably domino number 2. And then I think those teams that can't get those 2 big guys, I don't think they're going to commit to Zach. I think they're going to go with the lower price tag, and I think that's going to be Vooch, whether it's Golden State, whether it's the Lakers somehow figure it out. I just feel like something may happen. So that's it. That's the top 5. I want to thank Billy Donovan, Bulls PR, for getting Billy Donovan, and then Ryan McGuffey for getting this beautiful production all together. So that's it. And I got next.